Now football is a pleasant game, played in the sun, played in the rain, and the team that gets me excited, Manchester United, Manchester, Manchester United, a bunch of bouncing Busby babes, they deserve to be knighted. If ever they're playing in your town, you must get to that football ground, take a lesson, come to see.
Hello, we're here today with the authors of Sons of United, a book about the Manchester United youth team. We have Steve Hoban on the left, and we have Tony Park on the right. What is your inspiration for writing the book?
Well, if I can answer that, the inspiration behind writing the book really was to try to chronicle the achievements of Manchester United and their development of youth players over the years. The book actually contains a complete history of United's involvement in the FA Youth Cup, which has been integral to our success over the years in developing youth players, and also it chronicles the players that have come through to the first team right back to the 1930s.
Take us from the beginning. How did you go about researching the content of the book?
Well, the research obviously has been the hardest part because it's been the most time consuming. I mean, I've been to literally dozens of libraries up and down the country, and I've actually made over 150 visits to the British Newspaper Library in London, but obviously that's been over a very long period of time. That's been over 18 years. And so what I've managed to do is I've managed to get at least 2 match reports from every game that United have played in the FA Youth Cup, and also lots of incidental research which has helped us to compile the book that we have.
And I think what happened after that was once Steve had all his match information, we went through a process of trying to track down all the 500 odd players that played for the club since 1952, and went through a process of interviewing those players, finding out about their careers, finding about the clubs they played for, what they were doing now, how they came to the club, and we produced biographies for every one of those players, in addition to then trying to work out, Steve, how we were going to fill some of the blank spaces, yeah, which we did through pieces of memorabilia, both from our own collections and from the collections of others.
So how and when did you two meet, and how did you start working together?
Well, it was interesting actually. I was down at Carrington many years ago and I was watching a youth game, and I was talking to a few of the lads on the sideline, and they asking questions about where exactly this ex-player happened to be, and so I answered the question and said he was playing for a certain club, and then they asked me another question about where a different player was, and I said, well, this player's at this particular place, and they just said, well, how do you know all this stuff? And I said, I don't know, I've always kept records of junior players' careers, I've always kept statistics and data about this stuff, and they suggested I get in touch with Steve Hoban. And I said, well, who's Steve? And they said, well, there's this other United supporter, and for many years he'd been in the process of writing a book about the Manchester United youth team. Well, that sparked my interest straight away, and a few weeks later a mutual friend introduced Steve and I, Steve told me a little bit about his project and what he was trying to do, and I was very excited about that, and offered my help and offered my resource to say that if he wanted a second person to get involved, I could help, shoulder some of that responsibility, because I know just how hard it is when you're working on your own. It makes a huge difference to have 2 people just to lighten the load, and I think that was back in 2002, yeah. And we've been working pretty closely ever since that time. And for the most part, it's been great. We've learned a lot, and I don't think it would be possible to produce Sons of United without that collaboration. Yeah.
Talk us through the major parts of the project.
Well, when Steve and I finally decided to sit down and map the whole thing out, there were some major chunks that we needed to do. Steve had done all the major research. What he hadn't done was to do all the writing. So for Steve, in the majority, in the main, he was responsible for the writing of the match reports, while I took up the reins of trying to track down all the former youth players and interviewing them and putting them into biographies. Once we had all the match reports and all the biographies together, it was a relatively simple task of chronologically putting them all together and just finding links and themes that would make the book flow. what was really obvious to us when we mapped it all out was how much visual material we felt we needed. So we then had a third stage, which was how do we now access people's memorabilia collections, to not just our own but other people's, to actually fill the book with some interesting and meaningful quotes, photographs, programs and such like. Then there was the more obvious part of the project, such as getting a graphic designer involved, and we used Steve's son Matthew, who was instrumental in helping us put the book together, as well as looking for printers and so forth.
So how did you decide on what to include in the book and what to leave out?
Well, the central theme of the book is United's involvement in the FA Youth Cup. So possibly the most important factor was to include a match report of every game that United have played in the competition from 1952 onwards. We also wanted to include chapters on United's early development of youth players, that's in the pre-war days, and we also had an introduction to how the FA Youth Cup got started. We then wanted to include biographies of many of the players that have played for United at youth level, and we tried to draw a balance between the ones that went on to become famous with the players who perhaps dropped off the football map as soon as they left Old Trafford, and we believe that we've got the balance right in that respect.
What do you like most about the book, Tony?
I mean, it's really interesting actually, because when we saw the final version of the book, it was obviously in digital format, and when the book was released, we physically got the version out, and the first thing that struck me was the pure weight. I mean, it's nearly 2.5 kilos. So when you see the book, on a picture or perhaps even on the website, you just don't get a sense of the magnitude of what we've actually achieved. And for me, that has been the huge success for me. And then when you start to look through the book and the pure quality of the materials that we've used, and the 500 odd photographs, many of which I've never seen before, we've included the 320 odd match reports, the player quotations, the different pieces of memorabilia, focuses on specific youth tournaments. There's so much information in here, information that people have never ever heard before, all in one volume. I just feel very proud of having been part of producing something of this magnitude.
So, of all of the content in the book, do you have a favourite photograph, quote, interview? What's your standout thing?
Well, that's a tough question. A lot of hard work has gone into this, and a lot of personal time. So, I don't think there's just one thing. I mean, just to get somebody like Wilf McGuinness to do the forward for us was a really nice thing to have in the book. I think a very special thing also in the book for us was tracking down the last of the Moojacks, Steve, where somebody like Jack White, who joined the club before the war, we've got an interview with Jack and some photographs. I think is fantastic. I think the other thing is some of the quotes we have are very unique. There's one from Billy Garton as an example where he told us something so unique and so specific about a game against Liverpool that, unless you were, you really felt you could be there. But I think for me, if I was going to choose one thing, there's a photo of Martin Rogers in the book, and Martin didn't make it in the game. He played once for our first team and then went into the lower leagues. But there's a photo in the book of him and his parents with Tommy Docherty, and he's signing his first contract as a player for the club. And I think that just encapsulates what it must be like for every single player who's been a youth player at Manchester United to meet the manager for the first time with his parents, an incredible feeling of pride to join the Manchester United family. And that one photo, I just think, just adds everything in together into one moment in time.
Well, I share Tony's sentiments in that I don't think I could choose any one particular thing. There are probably three things that stand out for me, and they all occur really in the 1950s, because a lot of the things that happened in those days shaped the way that Manchester United's youth team developed and continues to this day. The first thing was that when they won the Youth Cup in 1953, we then went on a tour to Ireland. Now, that might not seem significant today, but in those days it was fairly groundbreaking, and we've got details of all of the friendly games that United's youth team played in Ireland in 1953. Also, from 1954 onwards, United have made fairly frequent visits to Switzerland to play in the Blue Stars tournament, which has been a premier youth tournament now for decades and decades, and we have an outstanding record in the competition, and all of the details of United's first trip there are contained in the book. The other thing, which is probably standing out for me as the better thing of the three, is that we played in a competition called the Tomlinson Trophy, which many United fans will not even be aware that we participated in. And in the early 1950s, the Football Association used to run a parallel competition to the FA Youth Cup, which was called the FA County Cup, which still is actually in existence today. And what they decided to do was, in 1953, 1954 and 1955, was that they decided to pair the winners of the FA Youth Cup against the FA County Youth Cup winners, and for obvious reasons United took place in all three of those games. And although it's only a fairly small chapter, it does actually cover that particular competition in depth and opens up an area which a lot of people wouldn't have been aware of before.
So why is it so important to keep a record of the history of Manchester United's youth team?
Well, I think for many, many years there have been countless books written about Manchester United, and they have primarily concentrated either on famous players or the most memorable moments of the club's history. That's been almost totally to do with first team football. And the fact that we've got this rich history of bringing players through the ranks, of all of the club's achievements at youth level, there was nothing, not even the club had any records of anything like that. And so I think what our aim was as authors was to rectify that situation.
I think it's also important because what this does is it provides the statistical record as well of the history of the youth team in a way that people just didn't arrive in the first team. You know, they went through a grounding period where they started in the juniors, they'd work their way through the A and B teams, they'd break into the reserves, and then all of a sudden they may, if they're lucky, break into the first team. Well, they had, you know, a huge number of games behind them. They might have had 4 or 5 years in the junior sides. They may have had some wonderful achievements at that level. And for us to actually put all that information, that statistical information, in one volume allows this to be an incredible reference for future generations as well when they're starting to research how does the Manchester United system compare to other club systems, or how does a certain player, how did they break through? All of that is contained in this book.
Okay, so what actually differentiates this book from all the others on the market, would you say?
I think there's a few things. I think, first of all, it's unique because I don't think there's another book on the market that focuses on a youth team or a youth policy. I think the second thing that makes this unique is the pure scale of the project. As I say, it's 576 pages. There's 320 match reports. There's images and memorabilia that people have never seen before. There's interviews with over 100 players. There's statistical data that pulls together for the first time the whole history. Just if you encapsulate that all together, plus the fact that players have been personally involved in giving us the information, so we've been able to correct a lot of myths that have exacerbated over the past 20, 30, 40 years about players' names and about their careers and about what they did and didn't do. We've interviewed those players personally and been able to right those wrongs, that we can very comfortably say that the accuracy of this is probably unique in its own way.
Okay, so when did the book actually come out? Where is it available? And what's the response been like since it did come out?
The book came out in hard form a few weeks after it became available as a download. That was in December. And the response has been fabulous since then. We've had a 2-page review done by the Manchester Evening News. The following week, myself and Tony were then interviewed on BBC Radio Manchester, which was very, very positive. Just last week, and we're now talking of February 2013, we had a glowing report of the book from the Daily Mail, and practically every comment that we've had from all quarters has been entirely positive.
Finally, what are your plans for the future now the book's come out and you've released it?
Well, the book's been such a long project, it's taken such a long time, and putting it together in the last 12 months was particularly tough, trying to get everything as accurate as we possibly could for publication. And once the limited edition of the book has actually sold out, which we estimate will probably be no more than about 3 or 4 months' time, we then intend to have a little bit of a break and possibly start working on volume 2.
A bunch of bouncing Busby babes, they deserve to be united. If ever they're playing in your town, get yourself to that football ground. Take a lesson, come to see Wizardry by Matt Busby and Manchester. Manchester United, a bunch of bouncing Busby babes. They deserve to be knighted. They are the